Hello again, everyone. I'd like to review a wonderful little movie from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea. It came out in 1994, and the name of it is Oh Youth. And really, this is probably as close as you're going to get to a screwball comedy coming out of North Korea. It's really funny stuff. And what do I mean by a screwball comedy? Well, those were made, that genre was made, the classic screwball comedy was made probably between 1934 and 1942 in the United States. And it just been the height of the Great Depression until the beginning of World War II. And it's a specific genre. Let me give you a couple of examples. Probably the first screwball comedy was It Happened One Night with Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. And then another example that a lot of people are familiar with is His Girl Friday with Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell. And there's a lot of them in there. It happens to be my favorite genre. I just love screwball comedy. And there's elements of a screwball comedy you look for. And it's what makes it a screwball comedy. And the list of them here is most often the female dominates. The male has his masculinity threatened. There's a fast-paced dialogue. There's an element of farce. Courtship and marriage is always involved. Class warfare, rich versus poor. There's sexy without the sex. And physicality. There's jumping around, hijinks, pratfalls, fighting, whatever. We get all that in this movie, which is what makes it a screwball comedy. And it's surprising coming from North Korea. The film opens with a voiceover of a man. He's a father, and he's bragging about his 5 daughters. He says, I have 5 daughters. They're all athletes. And here I'm going to give you pictures of them. The first one is Il-ok. She's a soccer player. The second is Eok. She's a weightlifter. The third is Seok. She plays basketball. The fourth is Naok. She's in rhythm gymnastics. And the fifth is Oh-ok. She's the youngest. And he says, look at her, how cute she is. The movie's kind of interesting how it opens because it's almost kind of, I've never seen a movie open like this. Now keep in mind the cuts and the editing in this movie leave something to be desired, and it may have been chopped up or something a little bit when they got it ready for YouTube. I don't think the original was at all like this. But anyway, the title card, you see the title card, and then the next frame is a knife coming down in the stabbing position, an upraised knife, and then you see it's being stabbed into a melon. Then it cuts to a woman's face. And that's the mother, that's Mrs Pak. And then it cuts to the floor, and a man is sitting on the floor. Mr. Pak, her husband, he's peeling potatoes. I mean, he's really going after peeling potatoes. And he says, you know, haven't I peeled enough potatoes? He holds up a big platter. Look at all these potatoes I peeled. And she says, essentially, keep peeling until I tell you to stop. So now we kind of get an idea of the relationship, right? You know, she makes him peel potatoes and keep peeling until I tell you to stop. The female dominates, right? That's the one. So anyway, the plot revolves around the effort to get the oldest son, their only son, and the oldest, I guess, and his name is Ki-ho. And he's a PhD candidate, something about ancient Korean history. And they want to get him married. His mother wants to get him married. He doesn't want to get married right now because that would disrupt his studies. And he needs to get that, you know, he's almost there. And he's working on his thesis. So she still wants to get him married, and so they're around eating around the table, and the 5 sisters, the son, the parents, and the conversation goes, you know, well, you need a husband, you need a wife, and he says, I don't want a tomboy. All you girls are tomboys. I don't want a tomboy. I want a girly girl. And of course, they're all offended. They go, you know, what's up with that? And one of the girls says, do you know a girl as diligent, clever, and as loyal as an athlete? And the mother says, no athletes for my son. Kehoe is a sensitive lad, and an athletic woman would dominate him. Which the irony is delicious, because look how Mrs. Pak dominates her husband. Keep peeling those potatoes until I tell you to stop. Incidentally, Mr. Pak is a television sports journalist, something like that, and the mother is something to do with middle management in Parks and Recreation. So they both have jobs. But the mother says, my son doesn't need an athletic woman because a woman only has to be strong enough to lift a pot off the stove. That's it. Anything more is unnecessary. And so, again, the daughters are a little upset about this. But she puts her foot down. What kind of daughter, what kind of girl is she going to let marry her son? And so here's where it's some surprising, because whenever I see something coming out of North Korea, almost invariably something surprises me. I go, where'd that come from? And it challenges my bias, because I'm thinking one way about the country, then something else comes out. And so the daughters and the father, they're into this discussion around the table. And the daughter says, well, the father says, well, your mother is stuck in the old ways. And, we have to change her mind, because that old thinking. And so the youngest girl, the swimmer, she says, I've got an idea. Let's vote. It will be 6-2, and we'll win. And the father says, that's not a good idea. Those two are more powerful than us. One of them is a concerned person, which I interpret that to be a reactionary, stuck in the past. And the other is a dictator. He calls his wife a dictator. And so Ayok, the weightlifter, or one of the girls, she puts her finger over her lips and she said, shh, Mom will hear, the dictator will hear. Now, how that ever got into the movie, I don't know, because it's pretty interesting. The mother thinking in the old ways, no, democracy's not going to win because we're dealing with a reactionary and a dictator. Well, keep in mind that Kim Jong Il was a huge film guy. This movie came out of, this movie was approved by him 100%. So he was really involved in all these. He had total script approval and everything. How it was directed, how it was done. Everybody, this is a supreme leader. They did it his way. So this was approved by Kim Jong Il. And what does that tell us about Kim Jong Il? He doesn't mind talking about these subjects. Reactionaries, dictators, and democracy is not working when you run up against dictators and reactionaries. So if there is a political element in the movie, that's it. That's the only part I saw. So anyway, Kehoe, he runs off to the library, and he happens to, there's a mix-up. He reserved a book, but a girl came in and she got the book. She's reading it. He's all butthurt. So he goes outside and he's pouting, and the girl finds out that he had reserved the book and she'd grabbed it. So she goes out to apologize for him. And here's like this great picture where they slipped in the phallic symbolism of the tree. She's standing there. That's an old standby in movies where they got to put that phallic thing in there. They got it here, And so he thinks, he overheard a phone conversation that she's making in the library and to the Embroidery Institute. So he was under the impression she was an instructor. So he says, cool, she's a good-looking girl, and she's not an athlete. Well, it turns out she is an athlete. She's actually a champion Taekwondo fighter. He didn't know that. And so this is where the fun begins. This is where the mother gets involved. The mother tracks her down. She's peeking out from behind a tree, sees her and goes, ooh, I really like her. She had beautiful neck and shoulders, perfect for my son. And I didn't know she's an athlete. And the mother is kind of funny. She's pretty hilarious. Some woman, some acquaintance of hers, mentioned a guy that might be a candidate for one of her daughters as a husband. And she says, "Oh, that's the guy with the Mercedes." Or is that the guy with the Mercedes? That's pretty funny. And then she runs into a Kyung Kyung, which is the embroidery girl, they think. And Mrs. Pak says, "Oh yeah, I have a friend of mine over in the next street or something, and she has a daughter who embroiders butterflies on pillowcases." So, I mean, that's great. She makes a lot of money at it. You'd do well. I'd be happy to have you as a daughter-in-law. And the mother doesn't know that Kim Kyung is a Taekwondo fighter. See? And so this is where it all happens. Keep in mind that pretty much all movies you're going to see out of North Korea have an element of homage to the state, homage to Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong Il. And we call that propaganda. But they always pay the respects in the movie somewhere too. And a lot of the time, even most of the time, that's integral to the plot. A classic example might be a girl doesn't want to have anything to do with a guy because he's lazy and he hasn't met his quota. And so he says, "Well, if I like this girl, I got to meet my quota." So whether he's in a factory or working on a farm or something, then he redoubles his efforts, meets his quota, and then the chick digs him and they live happily ever after. That doesn't happen in this movie. What propaganda there is, that we call propaganda, is kind of laid over like a coat of paint, but it really doesn't have anything to do with the plot. Here's a picture of Mr. and Mrs. Pak standing together. This towards the end of the movie, and kind of fun how they call each other honey and darling through the whole movie. And then here's the happy couple, Ki-ho and Kim Kyung, standing together. Like a nice looking couple. He looks a lot older than 30, by the way. But anyway, yeah, enjoy the movie. And like I say, I'll leave a link below that you can look at it. And it's pretty fun. I mean, when I first saw it, I just fell on the floor. I'm going, this is funny stuff. Coming out of North Korea. Especially with the knife going into the melon and then the mother's going, and you go, whoa, this is a scary woman. It turns out she is. She's like a real hyacinth bouquet, if you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, I'll leave it at that, and enjoy the movie, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.